Okay. Hello, everyone. Oh, I should turn that on. Hello, welcome to our Friday night instructor presentations. Thank you everyone for being here, both on Zoom and in person. I am Anna Koplik. I am the host for tonight. All right, so if you haven't been here before, this is how it works. We have 10-minute presentations from the instructors on campus. Once they get to 10 minutes, I'll wave frantically at them so they know that they're at 10 minutes. If they get to 12 minutes, I'll wave even more frantically, or someone might play a weird sound in the background. Who knows what's going to happen? But anyways, it's going to be a really fun night. Okay. And first, we have Wendy Weiss with assistant Carl Johnson in Fibers here to introduce her.
All right, hello, I'm Carl Johnson, the Fibers assistant. Wendy. Wendy, artist, and weaver. She exhibits ikat weavings in solo and group shows in North America, Europe, and Asia. And she teaches workshops on creative applications. So please welcome Wendy.
Hi, everyone. I'm really thrilled to be here. It's our second time to be at Peters Valley, and I grew up in New Jersey. My mom is here in the audience. My brother Ben is here in the audience, so that makes it even more thrilling. And I am so impressed with the Peters Valley staff for pulling off workshops during a pandemic, because sadly the pandemic isn't over. So everyone who is quite courageous, and thank you. Behind me is a picture of my studio loom with an ikat weaving. For those of you not familiar with weaving and ikat, you can see that the pattern is already emerging on the thread on the loom, and then the weft I'm weaving is just a solid color. So what I've done is take the yarns that make the warp and selectively dyed them by binding the design that I want, so it won't take the dye, and allowing the dye to only penetrate where I want the color. But I'm going to take you back in time in my earlier life when I was a fairly young professor at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I had an opportunity to go on a canoe trip with the outdoor rec people, but it turned out to be a terrible, terrible weather weekend, and they canceled it. And I was devastated. And my office mate said that his wife needed a ride up to Kadoka, South Dakota. And I said, okay, I'm packed. I'm ready to go. We'll go right after work. And it turned out that she needed a ride to go to a vigil at a nuclear missile site that was organized by a group called Nuke Watch. And so that was the beginning of my work, really exploring politics and textiles. And so the first weaving I did, or one of the first, was the series of At the Fence weaving. So this is number one, made in 1989, which is probably longer than some of you are old. That's okay. And I was really interested in the first use of nuclear weapons, which was at the conclusion of World War II, and looking at the scarred remains of the cities that had been bombed and the figures who had been burned in the horrific blasts of nuclear weapons. So there's kind of a ground zero there. And then the motif of the fence was a motif I wanted to use because the people I went on the missile vigil with were activists who would go right up to the fence to state their protest to the stockpile of nuclear weapons. And at the fence number two is more images of people, and you can see the same faces used, the smaller heads, and because those are screen printed on the warp threads, which are on the loom but not woven. And then the larger face is a woman's face looking down, and that's hand painted with fiber reactive dyes. So at this time I was using commercial dyes called fiber reactive dyes, and I was using a combination of wool fibers and cellulose fibers. Then the last weaving of this series was at the fence number 5, of my brother, and all of, and there were areas of conflict. So I've been looking at World War II, and then I thought, well, time to bring it more to the present. And so a PLO woman, the Palestinian Liberation America, from the military, who was in Panama. So perhaps the contrast to the people fighting for various kinds of freedom. And then Inner Spiral was a more contemplative piece. And because at that time, my whole family was experiencing personal loss with the death of another brother of mine. And so this was really, well, what happens? Where do we go when we die? And so one thought I had, well, these two beings, like the trunk of a tree, merge together and somehow live on in us. And then the light, the yellow, was more about that thing we don't know, the flashes of light. Sculpture from 1990 to 94, moving forward a little bit. I used the imagery that I was developing for the weavings in sculpture because I really did like making three-dimensional spaces. And I must have gotten tenure at this point because I was doing the weavings that could be rolled up and shipped to shows easily and not doing dimensional work. So for those aspiring to academic life, you have to keep justifying yourself by getting into peer-reviewed shows. And it's really hard to ship up a sculpture. But once I had tenure, I started making things that were harder to get to shows outside of Nebraska. And so Pentagon Project was one of those pieces. And I screen printed the imagery on a polyester spun-bound non-woven fabric and dyed the fabric and continued working with the imagery that I had been. And so at this point, I was designing all the sculpture, the structure myself, and building it myself, not really knowing how to do it, but that's what I did. And you could walk inside and there were somewhat different images on the interior space of the sculpture. This, as I recall, was something like 8 feet tall and 13 by 13 feet. And then this piece called Wheel of Fortune, Women in the War Zone, I was thinking about the tragedy of women, that what we call the collaterals of war. We have children who are abandoned, they are orphaned. We have women who lose family members. We have starvation, we have rape. We have all kinds of brutal acts. And I was thinking, how lucky am I to be born in this country? And there's so many women and children, not to mention men, all over the world who don't have that luck. And I should say there are people in our country that don't have that luck too, which is another conversation. But then we're going to jump ahead a little bit to why I started working with ikat, and that technique where you dye the yarn before you put it on the loom, because all those other weavings before that I showed you, I was working directly on the loom, painting with dyes, but the technology was changing in the weaving world and you could buy computer assisted technology. And so I had done that with my loom. There were electronics on it and I felt I couldn't do any more warp painting and dyeing and carrying water to the loom. So I thought I would use ikat. And I was able to get a Fulbright to go to India to work with a traditional artist. First, I had to identify him once I got there, but I did and was able to document his work. And I thought, well, when I come back, a real test of my learning would be, could I write text by this method of resist dye? And so here's an example of one of the first weaving I did after I worked with Beetle who was the master weaver. And then some years later, I got a second Fulbright to return to India. And this weaving, Lichtenstadt Ghetto, 1940 to 1944, was a return to thinking about World War II, but it was inspired by teaching in Poland, living within the confines of the ghetto in Łódź, where we were housed when I did the workshop on ECOT for the design school there. And this was inspired by a granite marker on one of the buildings. And I designed it to show in the Triennale of Textiles that takes place in Łódź every 3 years. Then on a smaller scale, this resist weaving, well, I was still thinking about how did people survive, those that did survive the camps, and those that didn't, they still formed acts of resistance in small and large ways. And then it just so happened, I did this in 2016 before an election. It became a movement too in this country. Then another weaving, the one that's in the gallery now, Gaza Scar Camp, I continued to use the ECOT technique, and I was reading the newspaper, seeing that there were lots of problems going on in between the border of Israel and the Palestinian territories. And so I wanted to, I mean, I just can't understand that either. And so we've got scars and we've got camps, and whose camp is whose and who's been in a camp. And here's a detail where I hope you can see the weave structure. I'm also fascinated with weave structure, so I like to combine the technique of the weave structure with the imagery in the weaving. And this is a collaboration between Jay and me. Those of you who are in Jay's class can probably guess what part he did and what we collaborated on. And this we designed for the Platte River. And the Platte River, Platte means flat. It's one of the main rivers that runs through Nebraska. And the show was about the Platte River. And then this piece, Defy Tyranny, is recent 2020 and more text. And that's it, except for anybody listening, I am gathering information about natural dye gardens in North America. And if you haven't contributed to my survey, if you grow plants or harvest them, please contribute to the Natural Dye Survey. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Wendy. Okay. So next up, we have Tim Jacobsen with assistant Maggie Seinfeld here to introduce him.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maggie Seinfeld. I'm the Photo 2D Mixed Media Special Topics Assistant, here to introduce Tim Jacobsen. Tim Jacobsen has been a photojournalist and freelance photographer almost 30 years. He grew up outside of Chicago and graduated from Winona State University with a BA in Mass Communications. Currently, he is a lecturer at Hood College and University of Maryland's Philip Merrill College of Journalism, teaching multimedia journalism and photography. Please welcome Tim Jacobsen.
Yeah, everything's good.
See, there I am.
Yeah.
So I also want to back what Wendy said and thank Peters Valley for having me here. And I also want to thank her brother-in-law for being here as well. I think family support for any kind of creative endeavor is always welcoming. I'm a visual communicator. My current job now, I am coordinator of a broadcast studio, but I also teach multimedia communication. So I teach a variety of photography classes, video media production classes, audio production classes, and kind of my visuals to people. As you guys know, we're flooded with visuals on a daily basis, more and more. We're just flooded with visuals, whether it's Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat or whatever it is. So my goal is to find new and unique ways to present visuals, but also not straying too far from those tried and true compositional kind of skills that I was taught and that were taught for me, whether it's Cartier-Bresson or Ansel Adams or Strand or anybody. So the images that I'm going to show you tonight, and I'm hoping I'm going to be able to do this right. All right, they're landscapes with a twist, and I'll let you know what the twist is at the end. Hopefully you guys will figure it out before then, but you might not. And the photos that I'm going to show you are from kind of all over the United States. I picked them because they're diverse landscapes, diverse kind of ecosystems in areas that are just kind of where I find kind of visuals. The first one I have up, this is out in a place called Alabama Hills. It's at the foot of the Sierra Nevadas. This is a feature called Mobius Arch. And if you find the right spot, right in the background is Mount Whitney, which is the highest place, peak in the lower 48. Kind of a photo that a lot of people will take when they're there, but you kind of have to get in the right spot to take it. This was pre-pandemic on a trip in between Christmas and winter. And if you're going to go out and you want to go to Mount Whitney in between Christmas and winter, don't, because there's snow. They close it. This is also on that trip. It's a place called Fossil Falls. It's an ancient lava flow through the middle of the desert. It's black and white, or an image that I turned to black and white. And again, it's the Sierra Nevadas in the background. While we were out there, we were going to do Mount Whitney. The whole point of this trip was to do Mount Whitney, which is the highest place, and then go to Death Valley, which is the lowest place. And this is an unbelievably amazing place in Death Valley. It's called Artist Palette. And as you can see, the colors are quite amazingly incredible. That's my daughter sitting there. I kind of used her as a kind of a scale, so you can get a scale of that. A lot of people think landscapes need to be horizontal. That's crap. Landscapes can be vertical, landscapes can be horizontal, they can be square, they can be whatever you want. We'll go completely other side of the country. This is Assateague Island, which is on the eastern shore. If people don't know where that's at, this is the Virginia side. This is at sunset. When I do a lot of my landscapes, I try and give them depth. So as much as possible, I will try and raise my horizon line to give a sense of motion from foreground to horizon line. So while I will always, or not always, but I tend to try and find something in the foreground to use as an entry point to get you kind of interested in that photo. And this could be a little puddle at low tide. It could be a little tuft of grass. And again, these are all sunsets. It could be something like that. And it's funny, I always go with people who are like, we need to get there before the sun goes down. We need to get there before the sun goes down. I'm like, no, you don't. The best photos are after the sun goes down, because the light evens out. You can, the colors are better. You get images like that. This is the parking lot after a storm on the beach. It's just, again, it's a super low angle. And you can do that. You can shoot the sunset, and then you can turn the other way. And this is my attempt. This is a handheld 4-second exposure. I thought I can just do that. And it's what we kind of like to call a happy mistake. In photography, it happens in ceramics and painting and in any kind of visual, where you were trying to create one thing and it didn't work, and you're like, oh, that worked out even better than it did before. So I just kind of like the pastel kind of feel of this, in the sense of motion that's going on. This is an early morning kayak trip. I kind of liked the fog and the sense of kind of mood and flatness. I think sometimes the best times to go out and take landscapes are when a storm is approaching or right after a storm. And this is on a dock at a house that we stay at with the storm approaching. And my kids will think I'm nuts. They're like, storm's approaching, everybody go inside. And I'm like, I'm going to grab my camera and I'm going to go out on the dock and photograph until it pours on me. And they're like, okay, but you get images like that. We'll go completely again. This is the Minnesota Boundary Waters canoe area. Up along the Canadian border. I was on a 4-day canoe trip with my brother up there. And this is after the sun went down. We were out in the canoe, and I just thought it was like super cool because it looked like the horizon line was on fire. And that's on the left is one of our canoes for the trip that we had, and I kind of used that. I love black and white landscapes. I think kind of have connections with black and whites differently than they do color images. So I kind of, and I took this image knowing that I was going to change it to a black and white. This is an image from our canoe holding the camera right at water's edge. Sometimes it's kind of harrowing to hold a camera that close to the water and think you might drop it, but that's okay. Sometimes you got to take risks. Right? This is also up in Minnesota, right along Lake Superior. It's a place called Raspberry Falls, which is kind of a side trip that we took. But I kind of liked how the flowers in the foreground kind of gave a sense of perspective with that waterfall. And then we go completely different. And this is in Western Maryland. This is a place called Swallow Falls. One of the highest waterfalls in Maryland. Again, for a bit, I kind of backed off a little bit and did that. Again, another vertical. I actually took this out the sunroof of my car because I didn't want to go and took a photo out the top. This is another, this is in a place in West Virginia called Dolly Sods. If you ever get to West Virginia, go to Dolly Sods. It's one of the most visually unique and diverse places on the planet. This is a bald cypress swamp in Eastern Maryland. And again, I took this photo knowing that I was going to change it to black and white because it was in early spring. There was no color. It was a kind of a gray, cloudy day, and a sunflower field. There's a place near where I live called McKee-Basher Wildlife Management Area, and they have about 4 acres of sunflowers that you can just go and walk and take photos. And I will suggest if you're going to go to some place like this, and I do it now, I brought a ladder because they're about 8 feet tall. And to get a perspective above them. Another vertical shot out the roof of my car. This was up in Western Maryland. This was about 8:30 in the morning. It was minus 10 degrees outside, which is why I didn't get out of my car. Just a simple composition at a farm. I have a tendency to, when I'm driving places, I will see things and I'll just pull off to the side of the road, or I'll find an exit and I'll turn around. And this was just a farm field with just a tree in the middle of it that I found kind of interesting, and worked that for about 10, 15 minutes. It's another trail in Dolly Sods. And you'll find in just a second, like why I like Dolly Sods, because you get views like that. And then you also get views like that. And those are all, and all those photos, that one, that one, and that one are all in the same place. And that's mine. Does anybody know the twist? Don't say it because you know. Does anybody know what the twist was? Took them all with my phone. Every single image on there was taken with this phone. Yeah. So the point there is, it's not, I always tell people it's what's behind the lens, not It's just a new tool. We went from film to digital, and when we went to digital was crap. And now digital is so much better. Digital photos were just not good, but it's where we were going. And now we're taking photos with our iPhone that are, almost better than film cameras because we can do so much with them. But thank you guys. All right, go out and take photos.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so next up, we have something a little bit different. I'm gonna stop screen sharing. And we are gonna have a whole presentation performance. I don't know what's gonna happen, but I will turn the camera. We are gonna have Jay Kreimer, who's doing a class that I'll let someone else explain, and assistant Kat Nash here to introduce him.
Hey guys, I'm Kat Nash, the woodworking assistant. This week in Wood, Jay Kreimer is teaching the Listening to Materials, Making Musical Instruments class. He is a sound artist, sculptor, and invents instruments. He has toured widely performing with his invented instruments and across Europe, North America, and Asia. In 2011, he was a finalist in the International Goffman Music Instrument Competition and at Georgia Tech. In 2013, he was awarded a Fulbright Senior Research Scholar and was just awarded another Fulbright to make original instruments in India from local materials. Please join me in welcoming Jay Kreimer.
Thanks, Kat. Well, I love being here and working with energetic people who just jump into making stuff. And I couldn't be happier about that. Today was great. And it's just wonderful to be in this beautiful spot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play some stuff on these, and then I'll backtrack a bit and talk about where they came from and how I get the job. So let's see. I better turn on the PA. The virtual set. That one's a pandemic era instrument. So is this. Okay, I made these. This one's modified. Do I have a couple minutes?
Yeah, you've got 5 more minutes.
5 more minutes or so left. This one is one of the things that, so we're now in the section of the talk where I'm talking about where this stuff comes from. So this is one of those, was one of those child's toys before they were digital and or electronic at all. And I've been a thrift store guy since I was probably 12. This is something I got when I was much older than 12, like 35 or something. Anyway. Well, let's look at that. And this is a boinger out of another one. Now, that boing sound are directly to this one, which is, it was pretty early, around the same time, actually, maybe a couple weeks later. I got real interested in the different varieties of boings you could create using different metals. So some of the components there are chainsaw return spring. What do you call those things you stick in shoes to stretch them out? Shoe stretcher. Okay, shoe stretcher. Something I couldn't even identify. There's one of the old-fashioned hat pins that are about this long that could kill you. And there's that. And the shape of the thing is a modified version of the first one of these I made, which was from a hollow core door I found in the street about a block from my house. I thought, hollow core door, it's old plywood. Some Gibson guitars are old plywood. They sound great. Maybe it'll sound good. It turned out it did. So I started making this big square that I carried around to play on. And a chance to go to Europe. So the shape of this weighs about 10 pounds. Is the exact thing that fit inside my suitcase I had at the time that I could travel around to shows with a suitcase. And this part of it came from a dream, where I had a dream of stacked up sets of threes. And it turns out that if you combine strings like that in a 3-way combination, you get really funny harmonics from it. And I made that stick today out of a dowel because I forgot the actual stick in my studio, so it's not quite as tense as it would be, so it's not quite as clear. But I kind of like it. This one, these two pieces, all some type of a decorative candle protective thing, I guess, put them on the shelf. And I looked at it, I thought, oh, I know I can do with those. So I picked them up, and they even fit together perfectly. So I went home, drilled a hole, put on a piezo pickup I made myself, and plugged it in. It's like, oh, okay. So now this guy's been in India, been all over Europe, North America, from the thrift store. This one, I've got kind of a series of instruments like that. I have another one not plugged in back there. I just decided not to hook up. But I at one time gym floor from a rural Nebraska town when they cut it up, so it's really hard maple. So I got all this maple I can make instruments out of. So I started making the shape, which has these turned over ends. And like some of my things, they don't happen in 30 seconds like that one, but it might take a couple of years. So this one, I had a tape measure and failed. So I broke it open and the spring, the spring pops out, the return spring. First one I broke open, I didn't really know how to do it. So I threw it down and it broke. And it came down and hit me in the fingertip. It goes, boing, and didn't cause much damage. I found out I really liked the sounds, and I figured out a way to hook them solidly here and put bass tuners on so you can tune the things. So this one came out of an earlier version of one of these, where I was just fooling around and put a second bridge here, and I realized you could play behind that bridge and still get these good sounds and bend them a lot. So I made this one almost the most, well, this is the most recent one up here. This is next, and this, I guess this is the most recent, then this, and this, but all in the past year. And I would have gone nuts with the pandemic if I hadn't had the opportunity to do that. So I like it so much I'm playing out a little bit on this one. Done.
Okay. Here we go. Hello, thank you everyone. You can all hear me, so awesome. Thank you so much for being here. That concludes our evening. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We would like to thank our sponsors for making programs like this possible. If you liked this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel to receive more like it in the future.